Okay, welcome everyone. This is day two of the Pressure Free Deep Dive for February 2025. And this is a series that I do occasionally. I go deep on certain topics. If you're new to my show or new to my work, I'm the creator of the Pressure Free Method in a business I call Pressure Free Living. And what I mean by the pressure free method and pressure free living is no matter what pressures or challenges or stressors come your way, you can steer clear, you can stay free of triggering the fight or flight stress response. So it's not stress that really harms us, it's the stress response. So you could experience a lot of challenges, a lot of stressors, but not release too many of your stress hormones or too much of your stress hormones. And so what I help people do is understand the patterns that they're in that are causing them to release these stress hormones over and over throughout your day. And I show you how to interrupt that and start living a few hours at first, and then hopefully day after day after day without triggering those stress hormones. And when that starts to happen, every cell of your body and every one of your body processes starts to work better for you. So everything mental, which we focused on last night, we talked about focus, memory, and a few other brain cognitive things, and how the stress response affects that. And all your body processes. So tonight, what we're going to really concentrate on is your digestive system, your metabolism, and why we build stress fat and how to start reducing that stress fat. When I started this whole program back in 2010, I had no idea all the different side effects that stress caused in us. And I didn't understand the ramifications of stopping those stress hormones until I started to experience myself. And I had a couple of really major breakthroughs at about 8 weeks in to using my method day after day as much time as possible for long stretches so that my body was starting to readjust. And these are three things that happened to me. One was that used to have eczema all over my fingers, especially this hand, cracked bleeding knuckles here for 35 years. And that's my hand now at 62. It's amazing. Like I've never had skin like this. We're going to do a skin topic. I think that's tomorrow. Yes. But that was the first thing that happened to me. I also noticed that bands of stress fat in my upper torso just disappeared. I never really had a waist. So I was a distance runner in high school. My arms and legs were like super skinny. People would look at me and think I'm very thin. But what was really happening was I was building bands of stress fat right in my torso. I see this on distance runners, marathoners. I see these little bands of fat, and it's really stress fat. And I remember my mother not wanting me to eat any less because I probably wasn't even taking in the calories I needed to sustain me because I was running so much. And and she said, that's just the way you're built. It's just the way you're built. Meaning I didn't really have a waist. But how old was I? 47, almost 48, when I started creating this method, used it on myself, and suddenly I actually had a waist. And so those bands of stress fat are not so much on my body anymore. And that is really pretty incredible. I'll let somebody else in here and make sure I get them muted. And so not knowing any of that, watching it happen within my own being was really pretty amazing. And then when I understood that fat will also line your arteries, I thought, wow, what's happening on the inside of my body? I'm seeing these effects on the outside, but what's happening on the inside? So let's dive into stress fat, and the first thing I want to do is share, what is really happening when we are building this stress fat. Like, why is it happening? Um, so that you really have an understanding of how the stress response plays a role in building this fat in different areas of your body. So three main areas. We build fat in our torso. We build a fatty hump at the base of our brainstem, right at the top of your shoulders. If you reach back there, you might feel like a little bit of fat, a little fatty hump there. So that's something that builds there. And then the other thing that happens is it starts lining our arteries. So even if you have a really perfect diet, if you exercise a lot, like if you have all that going on, you still might experience fat building in your arteries. Um, Stress is called the silent killer. It's really the stress response is a silent killer. It's so sneaky. Like it's so sneaky. In my book that I am about to launch on Amazon called The Pressure Free CEO, I talk about a CEO named Rajan Das who passed away of a heart attack at 42, I think it is. Um, and um, and the guy was a marathoner. Like he worked out every day. In fact, there was a TV show produced around him in um, in India, showing him like working out and everything. And it was really, really sad to see, this happen for him. Um, it was crushing. I mean, he had two children, a beautiful wife, and like it's just like really crushing for the company, for everything. And why would someone who was so cautious about what he ate and how he exercised, have this issue, have a cardiac arrest? And what happens is we keep lodging this stress fat in our arteries, and that is probably the reason why. And then a piece will chip off. So it's share again here. So that's just kind of an interesting thing to note. And it's and and so those three areas of your body. Now, why those three areas? First of all, when we trigger the stress response, the first flood of hormones that goes out are called catecholamine hormones. So when those catecholamine hormones go out, they're going to tell your cells to release fat and glucose into your bloodstream. So you have a massive amount of energy to fight or run away. That's why we call it fight or flight. So a massive amount of energy is going to be, or fat and glucose is going to be dumped into the bloodstream. It's mostly coming from your extremities, so your brain cells and here, which is why I had eczema on my hands. Is like my nutrients, so the food I was eating, could never get out to my fingers to heal what was going on here. I was constantly pulling fat and glucose out of those areas of my body. It will also pull from the liver, the pancreas, the heart. Like if you keep triggering the stress response, there's a lot of there's it's pretty complicated, but like the pancreas is going to release this little hormone that tells the liver to pull glycogen out, and then you can change that into glucose. So it's pretty interesting how we will deplete our organs and then our extremities to have this energy again, so we can fight or run away. But most of us aren't fighting, and most of us aren't going anywhere. So what's happening is this fat is staying in the middle of our bodies, in this torso area, and back here in this fatty hump. So that's the initial phase. There are a few other things that happen. In fact, there's going to be 5 effects. Let's go through these 5 effects. The first is that we're pulling fat and glucose from the extremities into the bloodstream. The first flood of hormones, the catecholamines, I call that the cocktail, the first cocktail, also is going to mess with your thyroid gland. And so it's changing up your body metabolism. It's also at the same time slowing down or shutting down your digestive system, all the way from your saliva ducts. The entire system is going to somewhat slow down. That's because metabolizing food, I'm going to let someone in here, and I'm just going to I'm on Zoom as well as Facebook. So I'm just going to let Sherry know. Sherry, you're in, and stay on, because when I finish at 9:30, I open up everyone on Zoom for questions and answers. So I'm just going to mute you right now, and then because I'm live on Facebook too, and then we'll come in together at the end. Okay, so let's see, where was I? Um, Digestive system. So if you ever experience a dry mouth, your saliva ducts are going to shut down when you trigger the stress response. And that's your saliva is the first place that you start digesting your food. Um, Many of us eat too fast. I definitely used to eat way too fast, and I'm trying not to eat so fast anymore. So so if you eat a little slower and let food digest here first, you're going to get a much bigger bang for your buck. But if you ever experience dry mouth, one of the reasons is that the catecholamine is going to shut down those saliva ducts. We don't want to be metabolizing food when we're in fight or flight, because that process takes a ton of energy. And our body is in a state where all it wants to do is protect us from the threat. All we want to do is fight or run away. So that's why this whole digestive system is going to slow down or stop. I see this sometimes when I'm working with teens, especially teens who may be on the verge of or actually have an eating disorder. They will they will tell you they're not hungry. And if they've triggered the stress response, they feel nauseous sometimes. You don't want to eat when you feel nauseous like that. So if you wake up in the morning and you've triggered the stress response, you might not want to have breakfast. You might say that, oh, when I try to eat in the morning, I just don't feel good. It doesn't make me feel good. And I've run into so many teens who are like, they'll tell me back in middle school, if that's when it starts. It's like, oh man, I can't tell you how many days I would go to school and my stomach hurts. And so the pain in the stomach, IBS, colitis, like all the things that are going on with the gut, you hear all the time about the brain gut connection um, and there's so much talk about clean the gut to help the brain. But if we just don't release those hormones, all this process is going to start to work better for us, and you're going to metabolize your food better. Let's see. Oh, there's another thing too, a little sneaky thing that happens when we release that first flood of hormones. There are a couple of areas in the brain responsible for willpower, and those shut down. So you won't have much willpower to make good choices about your food or to do a workout. Like your willpower is pretty shot. So I have this word up here, binging. When when you trigger the stress response, it's very easy to move into these B behaviors. You could be really snippy. You could blame people for things, but binging is one of them. And that's because these areas of the brain of willpower are down. So you might reach for food that's more like comfort food or foods that are going to make you feel better. Um, and then let's see. So those are the main effects from the first flood of hormones. The second flood of hormones are called glucocorticoids. And you're going to see if you go on the internet and even ask about stress fat, you're going to see cortisol pop up. They really need to talk about the catecholamines first, but cortisol has kind of become a buzzword. And it does make an effect on fat. And here's what those effects are. We're letting more people in on Zoom, which is fabulous. And I'm just going to make sure she's muted, so she's all set. So when glucocorticoids go out, they go to they go to these fat stores, and the fat stores tend to be your torso, your fatty hump at the top of your spine, at the base of your brain stem, and then your arteries. So the glucocorticoids go there and they expand the fat cells. So that's one of the effects. Also a little bit of thyroid things too. So you'll see, in fact, if you run into someone who says, oh, I have a thyroid issue, my hands are always cold, my feet are always cold. If I have a client who tells me that, I go, let's see if it's a stress response issue. Let's see if it's a stress hormone issue, because the stress hormones are going to mess with that thyroid gland and cause your hands and feet to be cold because we're wicking the power from them. So these expansions of the fat cells, glucocorticoids can also trigger hunger in you. So if you think about the whole thing, if we went back in time and we were being chased by the tiger, if you will, and we get into a cave to protect ourselves, but we don't have food in the cave. We've built fat stores exactly where we need them if we can't get to food. So we've built fat stores in the middle of our body so all of these organs will get the fat they need to run. And then we build it right here at the base of the brain stem. And this is my own hypothesis. I have seen no science on this, but I think that's an interesting place because our brain needs a ton of fat to operate. So if we build a little fatty hump there, it has access to fat if we can't get to food. And then this hunger is triggered so that we could probably get a little brave to try and get some food if we've got this trigger of, I need some food going on. But if we haven't run away from a tiger, we're just sitting in our office chair at work and something's triggered our stress response, or we're sitting on the couch at home. Where's the fat going? It's not being utilized. So that's why we're building so much of it. And again, those glucocorticoids go out, expand those fat cells, so now they're larger. By the way, it's very hard for these fat cells to disappear. And I remember doing some research to say, okay, what happens to the fat? Well, it kind of makes sense. We're combustion engines, like we're burning fat when we exercise. So what happens is we're actually breathing it out. We burn it, which I think is kind of interesting. So knowing that the stress hormones are the culprit for these buildups of fat, arteries, torso, fatty hump back here. How can we start to address that? So I'm going to go right into the 3 steps of pressure free. The first step is your target. So what are you aiming for? Do you just want to make sure that your heart is healthier and that you don't have arterial fat building up? Do you want less fat on your torso? Do you want this little hump to be less? Like, what is it that you really want? Getting clear about a target. A lot of times we'll talk about pounds we want to lose, but fat weighs less than muscle. So sometimes when you're actually working out and gaining muscle, you might not lose weight. So I love to think about it with my clients as, okay, so how do you want to look or how do you want to feel? And what kind of health are you after? So what kind of targets are important to you? I once surveyed a group of executives, and it was fascinating to me that one of their top stressors was how they looked, like how much fat they were carrying, how they looked. And so that might be a stressor too. You take a look at yourself and you're like, oh wow, I need to lose a few pounds. Or like we're stressed out by even how we look sometimes. And we're definitely in a culture where we pay a lot of attention to that. Um, and so sometimes to me, it's like, okay, get clear about what your real target is and why you want it. Do you want it so that you can um, play with your grandchildren, play with your children, be able to move better, take on some interesting challenges physically? What is it that you want? Um, so write down a couple targets because for me, when you write down a target, it like fuels the next 2 steps. You've gotten clarity on where you want to go. It's like you're designing a map for yourself. And we've got to have some sort of direction, even if it's emotional. Maybe you feel that you're an emotional eater. Well, remember when the willpower is shut down, it's very easy to want to eat and not to have a shut off switch. So maybe that's a piece of it too for you. It's more emotional. I want to feel more confident and strong so that I don't turn to food when I'm feeling bad. Um, so targets first, triggers are next. Triggers are identifying whatever causes you any physical or mental tension. And when we think about it with food, I think that we are challenged a lot in our society because we have access to so much food, and we also have access to so much food that isn't really that good for us. So sometimes food alone can be a trigger. I actually used to, when I was an athlete, I would actually trigger if I ate something that I didn't think was good for me. And the triggering of the stress response was far worse than whatever it was I was about to eat, because your body will really take care of pretty much anything you put in there. However, when you trigger the stress response, you're shutting down your digestive system. And when I look back, I wish so much that I had learned this in my youth. Like it would have just made such a difference for me as a performer, as an athlete, to understand what was really happening and why I was feeling what I was feeling. And hopefully this is making sense to you too. So identify a few things, especially first thing in the morning. For this particular deep dive, I'm going to suggest that you take a look from the time you first wake up, that early part of the morning. If you can start to find places where you trigger the stress response and interrupt those, that is going to be really, really powerful for you. Because think about it. We wake up, and if we immediately trigger the stress response, we've set up hours of time where our body and mind isn't operating very well. So it's up to a 9-hour effect for men and up to 24 hours for women. So if I wake up in the morning, and you know that phrase, get up on the wrong side of the bed? Like if I get up and I'm like, oh no, like I twist my ankle or something silly, I'm like, oh, I'm getting up on the wrong side of the bed. It's literally going to take me until the whole next morning for my cells to completely dissipate out those hormones that I've just released. That seems crazy to me. In fact, I kind of cried when I first learned about that. I thought, when was I last clean? I don't know, maybe age 2, but maybe never. Because, think about it. I think about the times when I was pregnant, I had 3 boys. There's no way a pregnant mom doesn't get anxious once in a while. There's no way she doesn't get upset once in a while and triggers the stress response. And when we do that, when we're pregnant, it's happening for the baby too. And the baby's reacting to its own to the stimuli it's hearing itself or experiencing itself. Like it hears a loud noise or a shout, it can actually freeze. Also, I remembered I read a great study about how um, if a mother is a chain smoker, like every time she takes a puff, the baby freezes. It's usually making a 6-second cycle with its spine in the womb, and that's drawing fluid in to fill the lungs and then releasing it. I want you to remember this because I'm going to talk about this as a tool in a moment. So bringing fluid in and then expressing it is how the lungs develop. But if a woman is chain smoking or taking particular drugs that cross into the barrier and cause distress for the fetus, it freezes. It doesn't make this, it doesn't make this 6 second spinal thing. And that's why you'll see some underdeveloped lungs. It's fascinating to me. So we've been triggering for a long time, and today is your day to stop. I love to say, like, this is the first day of the rest of your pressure-free life. Like, if you can start today just noticing a few things, and again, start first thing in the morning. When I did that with myself, I saw like 20 things that I could easily trigger over, mostly just little annoyances, little things. And so it's like, as you start to clean up that morning, and some people will say to me, you know what? I wake up and I have trouble um I have trouble not going into the loops of all I have to do today and the worries that I have and health worries and this is going on and my financial this and there's so much weighing on us. And so here's a little 3-step thing you can do. When you first come out of sleep, when you're just first coming out of sleep, it's a magical time for your brain. You're in theta waves with your brain. That's when your subconscious and conscious are really connected. So if you can pause for a moment, and what I do, I go through this little thing. It's like the first thing for me. I don't open my eyes yet, but it's like, what do I hear? If it's spring, or maybe there's a bird outside my window, or I hear the wind in the pines. Like, what are you hearing? What are you hearing first? And then when you open your eyes, is there something beautiful you can look at? Can you look out at a tree? I have this beautiful pine tree. I'm in love with it. So I always look out at it. And it just gives me such joy. I note if it's windy or not. Sometimes its little pine needles are just like bristling just a little bit, or sometimes they're waving. Like I note these things. I wake up rather slowly that way. And then it's not until after I've like been with my tree for a moment that I actually go into my head to like, what am I thinking about? What do I want to think about? Instead of just jumping out of bed and like we're already in it, just taking, it doesn't take long, by the way. It's like just a few moments. But that's setting you up for how you really want it to be. And you could ask one of those empowering questions like I talked about last night. Like, how can I wake up beautifully? How can I notice beauty today? How can I be confident and calm today? Like whatever you need to kind of set up your morning. So start with a morning for this particular session. That's what I'm going to focus on trigger wise. And now I want to give you a few tools. You might go a little over today, but that's okay. Um, so I kind of gave you one with that like wake up scene, that little 3-step thing. Put a hand on your belly, and I want you to just fully relax your abs. I was working with some coaches out in Connecticut, and one of the coaches said, maybe release is a good word instead of relax. Because sometimes people hear the word relax and they have a bristling defense to it. Like, don't tell me what to do. I'm kind of like that. Don't tell me what to do. But if you think about your belly muscles and you release them into your hand, that might be a little more gentle for you. And then take your hand over your abs to where it tucks back in, your way lower abs, and see if you can get that spot a little more relaxed. When you relax the lower abs in particular, but your entire belly area, it signals to your brain there's no reason to go into fight or flight. Our abs act like body armor to protect ourselves. No other animals keep their abs tight all day unless they're afraid. So we humans have been told to suck it in, to look thin, like all these other messages. There's trainers who will say, hold your abs tightly all day. That's not particularly good for your organs. So if you can start to relax your abs, you're instantly going to tell your brain that you don't need to go into fight or flight. And remember, with any tool I give you, you want to start it in the 10-second window when you first feel any tension, any emotion, anything that might cause you to trigger. So relaxing abs is a great one. The next one I want to give you is posture. And Lonnie just I have people chiming in here. She says, softened stomach works for me. It's a great one. It's really a great tool. So posture, think again of the scared dog. I'm going to pick a scared dog. You know, their abs are tight. They're curling up. They're also tucking their tail. So my personal body coach, Leela Veronica, has taught me so much about my body. And from day one, before I met her, I was always having people relax their abs and move into a great posture. But she really taught me how to get a great posture in a fun way. So I call these the H's. From your shoulders down through your ribs, open your heart space. Like just go wide and open this area of your body. Don't pinch your shoulders back. Like I was told to pinch my shoulders back. Sit up straight, stand up straight. I can still hear my mother. It's like open wide and allow space 360 degrees for your heart. So that's your first H. Second H, sit up a little if you're sitting down. Grab your glute muscles, your butt muscles, pull them back so you're actually sitting on your hamstrings, your leg muscles, so your butt is rising up towards your spine. Your glutes have two purposes: to support your lower back. And so many people, when I work in groups, I'll say, how many people have low back issues? It's unbelievable how many adults have backs that hurt. Your glutes are meant to be rising up and protecting that lumbar region for you, those vertebrae. Also to propel you forward. So when you get in this frame, you might feel a little more active. Next one is hips. So if you take your hands and grab your quad muscles, your thighs, turn them in and set the leg out a little bit. So you're like really, really stable is the best word for it. Your tail isn't tucked. If you had a tail, it could wag behind you. And you're really stable. I was just coaching a team out in Phoenix, and one of the people, he said, wow, this is incredible. They're fractional executives. And he's been using this frame, and it's changing so much for him. The next, I'm going to give you two more H's. One is the head. So we're on our phones and computers a lot. So if you can get your head up, but not just get your head up, but also take time in your day to look out at the horizon. Like get your head out of the house and looking out at something big, big. We used to be outdoor people, and we used to be seeing big vistas all the time. We would be walking and climbing and seeing much more than we do today. We've become very indoor people. So just getting your head up, first of all, it's great posture. And now you have your cervical curve and your neck doing the right thing. But also it gives you a broader perspective, and it's like you can get up and over your problems and not trigger the stress response. And then the last are your heels. So again, we're going to be dogs, and the front half of your foot is like the dog paw. So if you get your paw really down on the ground and very relaxed on the top, like you're really settling into the earth, and then lift your heels like you could slide a couple quarters underneath. So the paw is down and soft, couple quarters. And so again, that's like activation, but you feel very grounded. Posture is a great pressure-free tool. You can use it anywhere, anytime. You can relax your belly anywhere, anytime. You can combine these. And then the last one I want to give you is a long, slow breath. I teach breath a little differently than most people. I have people breathe out first through their mouth. So we breathe out and tighten your abs a little. Then relax your abs into your hands. Breathe in. And at the top of the breath, do a couple sniffs and then out. If you ever watch a baby falling asleep, or child, or even yourself, you might notice that you get to this little bit of a point and you'll suddenly go, you like take a few sniffs in, and then you'll do this slow exhale. That settles your nervous system. So if you feel your heart rate starting to go up and you start to get a little anxious or angry about something, immediately start this long, slow breath. And that's the fastest way I know to start to get that heart rate down for you. And if you take those extra sniffs at the top, it settles your nervous system, and it tells you there's no reason for you to go into fight or flight. this posture I gave you too is opening you in the front. And if you're open in the front, your brain is also going to say there's no reason to go into fight or flight, because if you were, you would coil up to fight and protect yourself. So it's like we're reversing that idea to trick our brain to say, no, there's no reason for me to get upset here. There's no reason for me to argue. There's really no reason for me to trigger that stress response and affect my body for hours. Like, really? Is there any reason why? I say that a lot to my clients. I'm like, is there really any reason why it would be appropriate to trigger the stress response? Unless we're under attack, probably not. But we have all these habits. We have so many habits of reactions that have been passed down to us through generations, and ones that we've created ourselves. And so those are the things that when I'm working with people, that's what we work on. We work on understanding what those habits are and how to start to break some of those patterns. If you want to go deeper, please just go to my website. I will put the link below. It's elleingles.com, and you'll see a little button, and we can have a talk, a completely free consultation to go deeper on this. I'm going to close out our Facebook Live for tonight, day 2 of this deep dive, and turn to my people who are on Zoom. And tomorrow night, we're going to talk about skin health, aging, skin health. That will be the topic tomorrow night. And so I'll see you tomorrow at 9. And I will now close this out. Have a good one.